Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. On Friday, we received another dump of snow. We even lost power for approximately 15 minutes. The unusual part was during the storm, we had a major lightning and thunder, which I don't ever recall seeing in the past when we've had snowstorms. In fact, ever. Today, Saturday, the shovel comes out and we start cleaning. All right. Today I have 3 stories to share with you all. I have 2 from New York State, which were requested by a subscriber, and another one that was submitted directly to myself. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I will be honored to share your story with like-minded people. Now sit back and relax as we begin with today's encounters. This first encounter story takes place over a number of years, from 2001 to 2004. We're going to be heading to Delaware County, New York, and the nearest town is Treadwell. My wife and I had our farm near Treadwell, New York, in Delaware County since the summer of 2001. The farm is above 130 mostly wooded acres. I don't want to give out the exact number of acres to avoid someone figuring out which one it is, with about 30 acres of fields and with a few trails throughout the woods. The property is bordered by probably 2,000 or more acres of continuous woods, privately owned, and countless more acres of woods and fields that lead all the way up to Canada by just crossing a dirt road, except for one major highway, 88. I have had a fascination for Bigfoot since I was young and read about reported sightings, etc. So I am keen to notice things that could be attributed to these possible creatures others might not notice. I say possible creatures because even though I have a strong feeling they exist, I have not seen one with my own eyes. The first thing that's happened was not long after we got our place. We were sitting around the campfire we made not far from the house when we began to hear the sounds of wood being pounded against wood, coming from what seemed to be our woods up on the hill. The distance up to those particular woods is probably 300 yards or more, but the sounds were clear and strong. I told my wife what I thought it could be, and she told me she didn't want to hear any more about it because it frightened her. There was no other explanation that could explain that distinct sound. I tried to duplicate the sounds in the woods myself, but could get nowhere near the resonance that must have been produced to carry the distance I think we heard it from. On another occasion, I took our dog out for his mighty nightly walk, and I heard a tremendous short howl, scream, yelp, with a whole lot of modulation. It gave me a chill down my spine. It was just a huge sound. We have coyotes all around us here, and I have heard them make some strange sounds, but I have never heard that sound from a coyote. Whatever made that sound, I would imagine had to be a pretty big animal. It did not seem far away either, so after shining the flashlight along the edge of the woods, I hightailed it back to the house, checking over my shoulder often. Perhaps along the same line, my wife was out with the dog one early evening in the fields, and this is the mildest dog you will ever encounter. It has only ever growled while asleep and chasing something in its dreams. My wife told me that she had never seen our dog behave this way, and it doesn't even pay attention to deer when it sees them anymore because it sees them so often. The dog was looking intently at something along the woodline and growling. My wife could see nothing, but the dog saw something that scared it. It may have been a bear, as I have seen tracks and signs occasionally. The last incident, and probably the most convincing to me, are the tracks that I saw in our woods this past winter, 2004. We have never been able to get into our woods in winter because the snow has always been too deep and the hill to those particular woods too steep. The snowshoes that we tried in the past just sunk into powdery snow. We tried a new type on a snow with an ice crust, and we were able to get into the wood for quite a ways. We came across a trail of 2 pairs of tracks going in a couple of different directions and then meeting up again 100 yards or so later that no human could have made. At first I thought the tracks could have been made by a deer leaping, but the tracks appeared to be a 2-legged stride with 1 foot pointing a little right and 1 a little left, alternating perfectly. I am 6 feet tall, and I took my snowshoes off to see what kind of strides I could make, and I was about a foot or 2 short of reaching the stride of these prints. The prints were pretty old, as they had been snowed on, so I couldn't see much, and I tried to feel for features like toes, but I could not say for sure that I felt any. They were quite long, but the snow could have melted to make them bigger. What struck us was the length of the stride, though. So that is our experience to this point for what it's worth. I only wanted to let you know that there could be something to these incidents. I would not dare ask my neighbors if they have ever had any strange things happen, even though they are very good friends of ours. I find it ironic that they may have had more significant encounters and may be afraid to say something to us about it. One neighbor did say they heard what sounded like a deer being attacked and screaming in the woods in the night. They have never heard anything like it, so that was their only explanation. One of them works for an environmental agency that I won't identify and spends a lot of time in the woods. This next one takes place in the summer of 2000, and we're going to Cattaraugus County, New York, and the nearest town is with Helt. First, let me state that I'm a college-educated person with 2 degrees, 1 in psychology and 1 in fine arts. Like many persons who have had this type of unexplained experience, it has made a mark on my psyche that has been permanently etched despite the ridicule poured on me by persons who in fact were not there. Scientifically, one may not deny or affirm the existence of one thing about which we have little information. For instance, in the 1600s, if one were to speak of electricity and television, they would have been deemed mad and a witch. Now you read this by just such means as were previously thought nonsense. We know it is fact now. Someday, I believe, this rare ape will present us with irrefutable evidence of his existence, like being a little too slow in front of a Mack truck or something. Enough of that. Here's why you're reading this. In the winter of 2001, while surfing the net for images of the Western art paintings, the BFRO website popped up with Western New York Bigfoot sightings. I had to laugh. You gotta be kidding me. Then to make it even better, there are these listen to the Bigfoot wave sound files to download. So curiosity made me do it. I'm laughing my butt off here. So I hit play. Suddenly I shut up. I'm in shock. My hands began to shake and the adrenaline glands almost blew my head off. The sound of the howl is exactly what I encountered one evening the previous September of 2000. So now I play the other scream file. All right, now I'm disturbed. That's 2 I heard within 100 yards of my house that same summer, about 5-6 times on different occasions. I never had any thought about Sasquatch before. This gave me pause. It suddenly gave me a flashback of living near the Tonawanda Creek in upstate New York and seeing a large 12 to 15 barefoot footprint in the snow along the creek riverbank just upstream of the North Pembroke Hotel, Magador Hilton. Barefoot in the snow? What kind of a jerk does that? There were, I believe, 4 of us kids there. I was about 11 or 12 at the time. We often played in those woods. However, that day we had an uneasy feeling and cut our trip very short and went immediately home. I thought maybe it was a bear track, like a hind foot, although I knew it was too human. No one even mentioned Bigfoot. It was not something that we ever talked about. Now, that memory is freaky. And there's more. I now live in the woods and I'm very comfortable here near Allegheny State Park. There are literally thousands of acres of forest surrounding my home. I am comfortable chasing 350-pound black bears out of my yard, sitting in the woods and having coyotes walk by, hearing screech owls, etc. This sound was unlike anything I have ever heard. Sometimes at the approach of archery season, I need to convince disrespectful persons that no trespassing actually means no trespassing. This night, I thought to encounter a coon hunter whose howling dog was moving towards my position down through the valley. The sound wasn't just right for a baying dog, but what else could it be? Now, at the same time this howling started, it was probably a mile off, more later, and at dusk dark. I have had the pleasure of having a wolf dog that is not too much pooch, you might say. Great animal, very mellow, even when on walks at night and the coyotes start yapping less than 100 yards away. He just looks and says, "Punks," and moves on. Nothing phases him. This night, he was like stone focused on the direction of the long howl. I get creeps remembering it. Never before or since have I seen him in that state, even in the presence of a black bear. His ears were fixed, and I had to drag him under protest back to my cabin. I was afraid that he might attack an expensive coon dog when I confronted the hunter. So, now the wolf is in the house, and I leash up my German Shepherd. I grab a spotlight and a very serious Russian weapon. I take off in the direction of the howl, which I can tell you is coming towards me, and I know there is a field which leads up into the woods near where we should meet. I get about 80 yards in that direction, and I notice that the howling is now going past above me in the woods, so I redirect my course for a more appropriate intersection point. Normally my shepherd is pretty bloodthirsty, which I do not encourage, just her nature. Tonight, she's cowering between my legs, trying to pull me back home to safety. I'm thinking, wimp dog. And she's really making me angry. I'm looking for the coon hunter's telltale spotlight in the treetops or through the woods. Nothing. Meanwhile, I've entered into the thick of the woods, cresting an embankment of about 35 feet above the road. Oh boy, that ain't no dog. What the? Weapons up, laser sight on. This is bad. When you have an attack dog, a nasty weapon with oh so many bullets and a spotlight which started to go out, thank you very much, and you're still scared, you just make sure the safety is off and the focus is on that little red dot. The thing was traveling at such a high speed through the woods it didn't seem real. I thought the dog had to be running, but when I heard it from about 120 yards away on the same level, nobody could convince you it was a dog, wolf, coyote, etc. I don't scare easy, but that was terror. Still, I never thought Bigfoot. In fact, I researched all of the wolf sounds that I could find and none of them matched what I heard that night. I thought that's why my critter was so interested. I just chalked it up to maybe a wolf. A neighbor who is about 85% deaf and a true hermit woodsman, 83 years old, asked me if I heard that howling the other night. Another fellow who is a Korean War vet who saw too much action also told me about the strange howling he heard 2 separate nights. He stated that he intentionally stayed up one night to see if he could figure out what it was. He said that he could never figure out the noise or creature that made it. Understand that the guy has camped out in a tent or camper in these woods for over 15 years. Frankly, he's seen or heard almost everything around here. Yet another neighbor asked me about the noise. Her first comment was, it seemed a lot louder than it should have been. Now know that she owns a kennel and is an accomplished singer-musician. Let's just say she understands acoustics. Incidentally, there is a great deer trail just above where I believe this noisy beast to have traversed the valley. This next encounter takes place in 1983. We're going to McDougall Township in Ontario at 9 Mile Lake. Now, just for reference, this is roughly 2 to 2.5 hours north of Toronto. Take a look at this area. Now, I would say even as we get up to about 45 minutes to 1 hour north of Toronto, it starts to look like this. Very forested, little towns scattered here and there, and small lakes. But as we head north 2 hours further north, then you tend to see a lot of lakes in the Muskoka area and in this particular region. About a month ago, I said that I would send you my encounter that I had in 1983 at 9 Mile Lake in Ontario. So here goes. During the 1980s, a group of friends from Indianapolis, Indiana, would go to a hunting and fishing camp at the far north end of 9 Mile Lake in Ontario. The cabin was built by an uncle of one of the members of our group in the 1950s, a Canadian who lived in Ontario. To get to the cabin, you had to boat in or fly in, and we always boated in thanks to Uncle Dick having a boat for us to use. The first couple of years, we would be jarred awake by something smacking the outside wall of the cabin in the middle of the night. The first time, we kind of shrugged it off. The next year it happened again, and several of us went outside to investigate. We found nothing except a mark on the outside of the cabin wall about 7 feet high. In 1983, we arrived, loaded the boats, and arrived at the cabin. Uncle Dick had been at the cabin for a week already and had 2 of his friends, which put us over by 2 on bunk space. The 2 with Uncle Dick said that they had to return to work and would be leaving the next day. I told them I had brought a 3-man dome tent that myself and my brother-in-law would use. That night at 10, we turned in with our rifles loaded. We both had Marlin lever actions, mine a .45-70 and his a .30-30. No rounds in the chamber. We always stopped at Parry Sound to get our licenses for deer and bear. After getting settled in, we were both fast asleep. Our tent was in a flat area about 30 yards from the cabin door and about the same distance from where you would enter the bush. At about 3 a.m., we were both jerked awake by a loud crack. This was no deadfall and sounded like someone broke a large limb in 2 intentionally, just inside the bush. My brother-in-law whispered, "You hear that?" We both had our guns in our hands and had slid out of our bags. I whispered, "Listen." Listen we did as something began moving our way about 10 yards inside the bush. We both knew that this was no forest animal. It was making 6-foot strides and coming our way. I thought strides like that equal to 8 to 10 feet tall and 800 to 1,000 pounds. At this point, I started to reach for the tent zipper when something told me, "Don't do it. Stay put." And stay put I did, as this huge thing walked right up to the tent and stopped. This thing was so big you could feel every footstep. After 30 seconds pause, it started walking around the tent slowly for the next 5 minutes. Then it stopped, turned, and walked back into the bush until we could no longer hear it. During this time, this thing could have easily killed us. I don't scare easy, but I can say that I have never felt that level of fear in my life. I was 28 then, and I'm 68 now. Even though I had one of the most powerful rifles made, I never chambered a round because I knew I would only make it mad. It was that big. Thank you for taking the time to read this and for all you do. I know what we encountered that night, and I don't care if people don't believe it. I'm honestly telling you, they're out there. This is in honor of all of my former hunting buddies who went to 9 Mile Lake through the years. They are all gone now, but me. They all know something was there too. Thanks again. I enjoy your work. P.S. We continued going back with no issues. I guess we passed its test. My last year to go was 1987. It's always on your mind and always will be there. I hope you all enjoyed these 3 encounter stories, and I would like to thank Brent for sending his encounter. It reminds me of Rich's encounter while canoeing in Ontario. Brent, you and your brother-in-law were brave to just sit there and wait it out. I wonder, and maybe you can tell us in the comments below, do you think it was a Sasquatch who told you to don't do it, stay put? Or was that your own subconscious telling you not to open the tent zipper? I'm glad you continued coming up to Ontario and enjoying your time with your hunting buddies. And I have to say, that was an awesome encounter story. Okay, that's going to wrap things up for today. If these stories reminded you of an encounter you may have had and would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Thank you for listening until the end. I truly appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out and smash the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. Have a great weekend, and I hope to see you all next week right here on Ontario Cryptids.